Howdy, today on Flippin Science, we're looking at inputs versus outputs. Thanks to Sam Moyle for producing this PowerPoint. So science understands we're going to look at. In order to survive, cells require an input of matter, including gases, simple nutrients and ions, and the removal of waste, and you need to be able to compare the inputs and outputs of autotrophs and heterotrophs. So let's review autotrophs and heterotrophs. So autotrophs make large, rich organic compounds from small inorganic compounds. Glucose, which is organic, is made from carbon dioxide and water, which are inorganic. Autotrophs don't need to be supplied with large organic compounds because they make their own. And the glucose that they make from photosynthesis, they can use to turn into all of the other organic compounds like oils, fats in the case of avocados, amino acids, and so on. Heterotrophs, they need to get a lot of inorganic compounds as well as large organic compounds because they can't make their own. So they need to consume other organisms to get their large organic compounds. Like us, we need to eat food so we can get our compounds like carbohydrates, amino acids, fats and oils. Products of metabolic processes in both autotrophs and heterotrophs also differ depending on the type of respiration being undertaken. So if you're respiring aerobically, you're going to be producing carbon dioxide and water, and you need to get rid of those waste products. If you're respiring anaerobically, then you'll need to get rid of ethanol and carbon dioxide if you're a plant or a yeast, and you need to break down lactic acid if you're a heterotroph animal like us. So just clarifying again, inorganic substances like water and carbon dioxide are used to make organic substances like glucose in photosynthesis. Nitrate and nitrite ions, which contain nitrogen, phosphate ions contain phosphorus, and sulfate ions, which contain sulfur, they are absorbed into plants from the soil water. These can then be combined with glucose to make things like lipids, which are your fats and oils, amino acids, bases, and nucleotides as well. So here's some of those pathways. So we're taking inorganic carbon dioxide and water, making glucose and oxygen. Down here we're showing how you can take, say, glucose and turn it into things like fatty acids, which are used to make fats and oils, which can then be consumed by us and when we eat some plants and when we eat other animals as well. In this pathway we can see how we can take glucose and turn it into amino acids. So here we have proline, here we have arginine, here we have tyrosine, here's cysteine. So we can make amino acids from our glucose with some other compounds as well involved. Things like, so here's our nitrates down here, here's our phosphate, and here's our sulfates. As I mentioned before, the outputs for fermentation depend on the organism. So ethanol for fermentation produces ethanol and carbon dioxide from glucose, and that happens in our plants and our yeast. Lactic acid fermentation produces lactic acid from glucose, and that happens in animals like us. So let's have a look at those inputs. So oxygen is required for aerobic respiration. Carbon dioxide is required for photosynthesis. Nitrates and nitrites are a source of nitrogen for amino acid synthesis. Phosphates are used for nucleotide synthesis. There's a sugar phosphate backbone in DNA, for example, and also nucleotides as well. Calcium is used to make plant cell walls, but it's also a cofactor for enzymes for heterotrophs. There's other inorganic nutrients that are required. The wide variety that are required for both autotrophs and heterotrophs. And organic compounds aren't required by autotrophic organisms because they make their own, whereas they are required for heterotrophic organisms. So glucose, some amino acids, lipids and so on, they can't be made by the cell, so we need to get them from what we consume. So outputs, oxygen is produced from photosynthesis. So if the rate of photosynthesis exceeds the rate of respiration, aerobic respiration, then more oxygen is being produced than can be used by the plant, so the excess oxygen is given out into the environment. Heterotrophs don't give off oxygen. We require it for our aerobic processes. Carbon dioxide is produced from respiration in autotrophs and heterotrophs. It's also produced from fermentation in plants. Lactic acid isn't normally produced by autotrophs, but it is a waste product of fermentation from heterotrophs, so they need to get rid of it or break it down. Ethanol is a product of fermentation for autotrophs, but not normally for heterotrophs. And urea isn't normally produced by plants, but it is a nitrogenous waste product produced by heterotrophs, and we need to get rid of that. So it's from the breakdown of extra amino acids that you take in. So things like if you eat too much protein, you break down those proteins into amino acids, you break down those amino acids into nitrogenous waste products like urea, and then you need to get rid of that out of your cells. So let's do our check. So in order to survive, cells require an input of matter, including gases, simple nutrients and ions, and removal of wastes, and you need to compare the inputs and outputs of autotrophs and heterotrophs. So today for Flippin Science, we looked at inputs and outputs. That's it for Flippin Science today. See ya!